It trips me out how we got Juneteenth and Father's Day locked together in the same weekend. Juneteenth is always the 19th, and Father's Day is always the third Sunday of June. Now, I ain't saying it's planned that way, but as an ancestral strategist, I'm going to investigate a pattern and a seeming coincidence when I see one. Now, off rip, this ain't a warm and fuzzy Father's Day tribute, and I'm not about to drag Black fathers either. This is truth. What I see is two lineage based holidays that attract energy and focus in the same close time proximity. And I say lineage based because Father's Day is about our own personal paternal lineage, and Juneteenth is about our collective lineage as descendants of enslaved Africans. Plus, for those of us Black women navigating single parenthood, ex husbands, and baby daddies, Father's Day can be complicated. But the through line I see is the fight and the potential for liberation. And in this video, we're about to explore how our liberation, our Black liberation, and Black fatherhood are connected, despite the stories we've been told or experienced about Black fathers and the stories we've inherited or experienced about Black men. And stick around to the end for a medicinal practice that can help you heal your paternal lineage, or at least begin to this Father's Day. So stay with me. But if you're new here, I am Barbara Ohuninifa. I am a griot, an author, an ancestral strategist, and the founder of Beautiful Powerful Love, which is a storytelling movement for the remembering, healing, and liberation of Black women at a crossroads. Now, if that's your kind of conversation, like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things, and let's get into it. Listen, people be wanting holidays, Father's Day included, to be just celebration and joy. And I love good food and drink, some old school jams, a soul train line, some spades and dominoes. I love me a good blue light in the basement party or a backyard party. And I love doing so with an understanding of the complexities of life so that the joy runs deep and not just surface, not just performative, so that our ancestors can truly partay with us because we are doing the work to liberate ourselves and them. So today we are celebrating Black fathers by naming what and how Black fatherhood has been shaped by forces a lot bigger than individual choice. And we are still holding accountability, but we're doing so in the context of what's real and not some Cosby Beaver to Cleaver fantasy. Because understanding all of it is liberation work. Remembering correctly is its own kind of freedom. So have some sipping water nearby, light a scented candle, burn some incense, do what you got to do to create a little vibe, and let's chat. Let's name the real. For some of us, Father's Day is gratitude. Your father showed up. He protected you. He loved you in ways that are still nourishing to you long after childhood ended. For some of you, it's grief. He transitioned, or he's still here, and the relationship you wish you've had never quite arrived. For some of you, it's confusion because he loved you and wounded you, supported you and disappointed you, protected you in some rooms and failed you in others. For some of you, it's anger, unanswered questions, absence, needs that never got met, conversations that never happened and maybe never will. And for some of us, it's not just one thing, it's a lot of things. Love might still be there, but so can disappointment and grief and frustration or straight up rage for real reasons that are valid. And for single mamas, the experience of Father's Day might add more layers of grief, frustration, and rage, particularly if the fathers don't hold up their part of parenthood and cause trauma to your children or to you. Not to mention whatever pain may still be within the circumstances of your split up. And here's what I want to say clearly. You are allowed to feel what you feel towards your daddy and or your baby daddy. You are allowed to miss him and be pissed with him. You are allowed to love him and name the harmful shit he did. You are allowed to celebrate him and still grieve what wasn't there. You are allowed to feel relief. You are allowed to feel not a damn thing. And as I said earlier, these lineage based holidays bring about emotional complexity, complexity that has its roots in patterns that predate your physical existence, but it's telling you exactly where something still needs tending. And if you are a Black mother with a complex relationship with your daddy and your baby daddy, I'm going to need you to tap in because there's something speaking to you there as well. Sip some water, root yourself in your own love, and let's go. I need us to talk about something that rarely gets named on Father's Day, not even in Black spaces. What was done to Black fathers, to our paternal lines? Not as a way to excuse harm, not as a way to bypass the real pain of a father's absence or his abuse, but as a way to see the full picture, because we cannot heal what we don't look at. From the early days of this country's history, enslaved Black men were forced to watch their children be sold and couldn't stop it. This project called America has been in the business of severing Black men from their families, then constructing a narrative that blames Black men for that severance. Slavery made Black fatherhood legally impossible. They couldn't protect their children, they couldn't provide for them. Their child could be sold, abused, tortured, or worse while they were forced to watch. The very things that fatherhood is usually defined by protection, presence, provision were made unavailable by law. Then, generations later, when the wounds of that trauma have traveled forward through families, it shows up in the data. Like in 2023, 47.5% of Black children lived without a father in the home, compared to just under 20% of white children and just under 30% of Hispanic children. And just take into account that this is all about living in the same home, not about active participation in the child's life. We got some other data about that we're going to get into later. But this same country points at Black men and says, absent, irresponsible, gone, as if the going were a character flaw and not the predictable consequence of this country's policies that never stopped. So let's look at the receipts related to the things that fatherhood, manhood is often associated and defined by: protection, presence, and provision. First of all, slavery separated Black fathers from their families by law. Then, after 1865, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, except for those convicted of a crime. Then, immediately, the Black Codes came into play, which criminalized Black life itself: being unemployed, walking at night, gathering in groups. All of these were crimes. Black men were arrested, convicted, then leased back to the same plantations they had just supposedly been freed from. The system didn't end slavery, it just updated the entry point. Convict leasing separated Black fathers from their families by policy. Southern states earned up to 70% of their revenue from leasing incarcerated Black people. Death rates of those incarcerated Black people were 16 to 25% annually. And one leaser, aka plantation owner, said, "These convicts, we don't own them. One dies, we get another." Ooh, child. Then the war on drugs. That separated Black fathers from their families by design. In the 1970s, Black people were arrested for drugs at twice the rate of whites. By 1988, it was five times. The war on drugs accounted for two-thirds of federal prison growth between 1985 and 2000. Prison populations flipped from 70% white in the 1950s to 70% Black and Latino by 1989. And the result? By 2007, just under a million men are sitting in state and federal prison and their fathers. And right now, there's still 38 states that have for profit prison factories. In fact, prisoners in Texas, Georgia, and Florida are paid nothing. Angola prison, which is built on a former slave plantation, is still a working farm with 75% Black and 74% serving life sentences. Tell me slavery ain't still here. 55% of state prisoners and 63% of federal prisoners have children that are minors. And the number of fathers in prisons increased 48% between 1991 and 2016. 92% of incarcerated parents are fathers, and their children, 1.5 million of them, are growing up navigating that aftermath. There was a study that followed thousands of Americans from adolescence into their late 30s and early 40s, and it found that people whose parents had been incarcerated when they were children before the age of 18 were nearly twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression or PTSD by midlife. That wound is still measurable decades later. And Take into account that study tracked Americans of all races. But when you add in the fact that black men are incarcerated at 6 times the rate of white men, and that over 90% of incarcerated parents are fathers, you can understand who is disproportionately living inside that finding. Black children are not just more likely to experience a father's incarceration, they are more likely to carry the depression, the PTSD, and the anxiety that comes with it for decades. And researchers noted that because Black Americans are less likely to be diagnosed in the first place, the real numbers are almost certainly worse than the data shows. That same slavery system updated its software. It's still systemically wounding people generationally. So, incarceration deals with protection and presence in terms of two of the three factors of fatherhood we're looking at. You can't protect a family or children that you've been separated from because you've been incarcerated. Now, the providing, the moolah, the cheddar, the ends. For my Gen X people, when you and I were children in the 70s and 80s, Black unemployment was in the double digits for nearly 20 straight years. In the early 80s, it hit 15.5%, an all time high since the Great Depression. For Black youth, it was 45%, nearly half. That's the economy our fathers were expected to provide inside of. In 2025, 90% of white men in their prime working years were employed. For Black men in the same age, it was 80%. Researchers tested whether education or skills explained that gap, and it didn't. Anti Black discrimination explained it. Now, 80% employed doesn't mean that they were well employed. In the 1970s, Black men earned about 62 to 81 cents for every dollar a white man made, depending on the city. 30 years later, by the 2000s, after civil rights legislation, after affirmative action, after all of the measures that were supposed to help, that number barely moved. Our fathers were working full time for three-quarters of what the man next to him was earning for the same job. That's if he could get hired at all. Now, today, even when Black men are employed full time, they're earning roughly $300 less per week than white men doing the same job. That's $15,000 less per year. Now, over a career, over a generation, over a lineage, that gap compounds into a completely different life. Now, the other part of providing is a place to live, right? That's part of the GWAP. That's part of the pursuit of wealth. The Fair Housing Act passed in 1968. 2 years later, in 1970, Black home ownership was at 41.6%. By 1990, it was 43.9%. 20 years, and the needle had barely moved 2 percentage points. White home ownership went from 65% to 69% over the same period. So it was already 20 points higher and grew by double the amount of percentage points in the same time period. Black home ownership in 2020 was exactly the same as it was in 1970. So they passed this law that said that they would stop discriminating, and that gap stayed exactly where it always was. And let's take this further. White families have a median net worth of $285,000. Now, understand net worth is not just cash, that includes those homes that they own. Black families, 45,000. 285,000 for white families, 45,000 for black families. That is a wall built over generations and maintained by policy. Now, the other way of providing, of getting that paper, is sometimes to get the paper. Now, we know that there's entrepreneurship, there's trades, there's a lot of ways to make an income, but one of the paths is education. That's how a lot of Black women have come up. In 1970, 4% of Black men had a college degree. By 1990, it was barely 11%. And during the exact decade of the crack epidemic, 1977 to 1987, the number of doctorates, and we're talking PhD or medical doctors, earned by Black men was cut in half. Now, they weren't falling behind because they didn't want it, they were being targeted and funneled somewhere else. Today, only 1 in 5, or about 20% of Black men in this country, holds a bachelor's degree. The education gap between black men and other men hasn't closed, it's tripled since the 1990s. And when black men do go to college, they graduate at 34%, the lowest rate of any group and any gender. So we got unemployment, we got underemployment, housing barriers, and education gaps. These are the circumstances that black fathers were expected to build families inside of. And when they couldn't, when the math didn't math, the propaganda machine made of policy, media, school, and every institution of the system that we live under called them absent, irresponsible, unworthy of fatherhood. At the same time, they was calling black women welfare queens, as if the conditions, once again, were about character flaws. But we know that this is and has been a predictable and planned outcome of a system that has been running for 500 years. All of it creates conditions that make sustained fatherhood harder than it ever had to be, and it's done intentionally. Now, I'm not saying any of this to remove accountability. Black women have had to stand in that gap for their children. That's real. The harm some Black fathers have caused is real. A child impacted by that harm give no fucks about the epigenetics or the external forces as to why. And I want to be clear about that. I know that, you know that. And I'm talking specifically about Black fatherhood because I am a Black woman with a Black daddy and Black men as fathers of my Black children on a mission for Black liberation, period. And I am saying that when you look at your paternal line, at the grandfather who potentially wasn't there, at the father who maybe was emotionally somewhere else, at the great grandfather whose name you may not even know, or your daughter's father who kept promising to pick her up to go out on an outing and rarely showed up, or your son's daddy who broke his commitment to you and your child before he was even born. All of that is real harm. And Black men have to stand up and take accountability for their actions and not demand placation. And sis, remember that despite how we feel about their daddies, that's your children's paternal line. They were not immaculately conceived. You're not looking at the lineages of men who didn't care. You are looking at the accumulated damage of a system that has been at war with Black fatherhood, with Black families, as they sought to extract profit off of all of our backs and out of our wombs. The reframe does not erase the father wound, but it broadens our understanding of what we're dealing with and what we have to heal collectively and individually. I told you you had some water. Take a sip, take a deep breath. Child. On this channel, I talk to and about Black women remembering and healing. And part of that remembering includes our ancestral fathers. These men, our paternal ancestors, were not the absent Black father narrative that this culture has created. They were warriors and farmers and griots and craftsmen and men who held knowledge that was deliberately destroyed. They survived the Middle Passage. They survived enslavement, which meant surviving the systemic destruction of every marker of identity and authority and fatherhood that they had. And somehow, against everything, they still transmitted, not always through presence, sometimes through absence that taught the next generation what it was determined to become. So my own grandfather, my father's father, he wasn't around. He had a bunch of children by different women. Multiple of them had his same name, and most of whom he never even raised, including my father. Now, I don't have a spoken story for why he did this. My father didn't know, and I don't know much about that part of my paternal lineage yet. Grandmama and them, I know, but there was never a paternal granddaddy in my life. I see what that absence became in my father: the absolute non negotiable decision to be present for his children, to show up, to stay. My father was there consistently, warmly, stubbornly there. And when I look at myself, at the fight in me, at the refusal to shrink, at the give no fuckness that have saved my life more than once, I know that came through my paternal line. Not just from my father's presence, and not just from my warrior ass grandmother and grandaunts and their gun toting daddy, but also from my father's father and his grandfather and his great grandfather on his father's side, and all of their survival, from men whose names I may never know, who endured not being able to save their mates, their children, or even their mothers. Whew. A study released in 2026, published in Families and Society, that was led by researchers such as Dr. David Miller. He studied Black fathers raising daughters and found two things that kept showing up. First was what they called reaffirming beauty. Fathers who intentionally affirmed their daughter's appearance, their worth, their cultural identity, not for the purposes of vanity, but for protection, because they knew what their daughters would be facing out there in the world. The second was bias readiness, preparing their daughters to recognize prejudice and navigate it without internalizing it. Now, honey, that's not just parenting. That is some ancestral strategy, whether the fathers called it that or knew it was that or not. It's ancestral medicine. And some of you received it directly through a father or a grandfather who literally told you explicitly, or through how he supported you, that you were more than what the world was trying to reduce you to, more than those stereotypes that we've talked about on this channel, the Jezebel, the Mammy, the Sapphire, all of that. And some of you received it indirectly through ancestors of your paternal lineage who have always walked with you, whether you knew or believed in them or not. Even if you were adopted or in foster care, they walked with you. Or you may have received it through your own refusal to quit that you could never quite explain, or through the fight that rises up on you when somebody tries to count you out or when they try to play in your face. That fight did not come from nowhere. It came through. It came from those who came before you. Take a breath and feel that for a moment. Try to locate where in your body you feel your paternal line. Here's where it gets interesting because the research tells a much more nuanced story than the Black father stereotype would ever allow for. According to CDC data, Black fathers who live with their children are more involved in daily caregiving than fathers of any other racial group. I'm talking about bathing, dressing, feeding, reading, homework, meals, conversations about their day, daddy type shit. 70% of Black resident live in the home fathers did these things daily, compared to only 60% of white fathers and 45% of Hispanic fathers. And even Black fathers living apart from their children were more involved with their kids than other non residential fathers. The lead researcher said it plainly: this data is the debunking of the absent Black father myth. So there are Black men who, despite everything stacked against them that we all talked about, the incarceration rates, the unemployment barriers, the housing discrimination, the long running multi generational pattern of abuse, oppression, and disenfranchisement by this country, there are Black fathers who show up with exceptionally high levels of involvement and engagement with their children. That is Black men breaking generational patterns of trauma. That's Black men shifting the trajectory of their children. That's Black men who honor their role as Black fathers. That's liberation, and I'm going to tell you why. We talk a lot about generational trauma, and we should. The wounds are real, the losses are real, the patterns are real. But I want us to remember something else today. Trauma is not the only thing that travels through a bloodline, through a family line. Correction travels too, healing travels too. A Black father deciding to stay when his own father left. A Black father choosing tenderness when he was raised on hardness. A Black father affirming his daughter and his son when nobody ever affirmed him and people around him were denigrating women. A Black father telling the truth when silence was the family inheritance. These choices matter. These choices actually alter a lineage. These choices help liberate a lineage from the inside out. A grandfather's absence shaped my father. My grandfather's absence shaped my father. My father's presence, despite everything he was carrying, all those things of being a Black man in Jim Crow South, And on top of that, having lost his only son, my brother, I have a video on my channel where I'm giving honor to my brother that I was named after. He's carrying all of that and he still showed up. My father's presence helped shape me, my sisters, and all his grandchildren. And now we get to decide what continues through us. I look at my nephew, the only grandkid with a child, and he don't play about his child. Man, he could be a whole fuck boy. And I don't know, maybe he is, but he is 10 toes down for that child. That's the work. Not perfection, not performance, but practice. The practice of determining what we learned and how we move forward. The ongoing practice of deciding what belongs in the future and what doesn't get to come with us. That is Black fatherhood as liberation. Take a breath, sip some water, and let that settle for a second. So, before we close, I want to offer you something simple. Nothing elaborate, nothing tied to any particular spiritual path or practice. Just a moment to witness your own paternal line. If you can, find a quiet moment, a quiet space. You can do it now or later today, or just sometime before the week or the month of June is over, at least for the first time. Place your feet flat on the floor or go for a slow, intentional walk outside. Maybe even go barefoot in the grass so that you can have direct contact with the earth. Do what's accessible to you. Now breathe slowly and intentionally. Really tune inward. Take your time with this. Because the first step, the first part of this practice is slowing yourself down and quieting yourself so that you can be with yourself and tune out the noise and the trauma drama from the day and traffic and work and everything else. Breathe slowly and intentionally and tune inward. Take as much time with that part as you need to. And once you know you're at a place where you're feeling, think of one man in your paternal line. Maybe your father or your grandfather, someone further back whose name you may not know, or a stepfather or a foster father that took care of you that you feel truly connected to. It doesn't have to be someone who did everything right. It doesn't have to be someone who stayed. I'm talking about ancestors and paternal ancestors. So, if possible, someone whose blood is in your body right now. But if that's not accessible, it's who loved you, who stood in the gap for you. And hold them there, not to forgive, not to blame, just to see. And continue breathing slowly and intentionally and deeply. And as you breathe and as you hold this person in your mind's eye, whether it's a name or you can actually visually see them in your mind, or maybe it's a cologne that they wore, something that connects you to them. Say out loud or quietly to yourself, but actually say the words. I know what you were up against. I know what it cost you. I carry what serves me, and I honor what was given. I receive the wisdom that belongs to me now, and I release what is not mine to carry. I release what doesn't serve me, not in anger, but in love. And what I heal here, I heal in both directions. And continue breathing deeply and slowly. And just let the ground, the earth, receive and transmute what you just set down. And know that you're not just a daughter. And for the men watching, you're not just a son. You are a link in something much longer than your own story. And what you do with what you inherited matters further forward than you can see. Our ancestral fathers, the ones who stayed and the ones who couldn't or didn't, they're not asking us to carry it all. They're not asking you to carry it all. They're asking you to sort it, to take the medicine and the wisdom and put down the wound, to put down the pain, put down the trauma, and to know that you were never carrying it alone. I am feeling that emotion come up right now because they carried a lot. We will never know what they experienced and what they went through. But we also don't have to carry it anymore either. And what you release from this paternal line, you release it for them too. Take a breath. And that's the practice. That's the medicine. That is liberation. And just stay there for a moment with it and let your body actually fully release and receive. So that practice is not a one and done situation. We got 500 years of enslavement, colonization, oppression, trauma, and it's still happening. So one practice, one time is not going to clear and cleanse your whole bloodline, your whole paternal line. But you can do it whenever you feel the need to ground. You can do it regularly to ground yourself. You can do it to connect to your paternal lineage. You can do it when you need to do important things and you need to muster up courage to take action. And you can do it when you just need to feel the presence of the sacred masculine that is always within and around you. If you're a Black woman and this stirred something within you, I invite you to go further, starting with my free email course, Love Letters from the Ancestral Mothers. And it gives you an initial experience of my 7 portals back to self framework. And it's free. Link is in the description. And you can go deeper with my activity book, Remember Who the Fuck You Are. That was built around the 7 portals to understand your inheritance, the stories that shaped you, the patterns you're carrying, and the wisdom that's still waiting for you to be reclaimed. That link is in the description. And if you want to go even deeper in direct relationship with someone to be witnessed, to be held, and with the full ancestral and political context, that's what my one on one sessions are for. That link is down in the description as well. And it's for the woman that's ready to stop circling and wants to go deep. Because sometimes understanding the story is only the beginning, and the real work is learning how to tend to it. Because the reality is, if we never examine what we've inherited or what we've experienced, it's easy to just mistake it for destiny. Well, that's just the way things are. We might assume that every pattern has to continue, every wound has to remain, and every story is fixed and unchangeable, it's final. But that's not what the ancestors teach. The ancestors teach us that people make choices all the time. And sometimes one choice changes everything. One person stays, one person tells the truth, one person decides to carry the wisdom forward instead of the wound. And that decision becomes part of the inheritance too. That's liberation. Not the absence of pain in a lineage, but the refusal to let the pain be the only thing that survives. Whew, honey, I thank you for being here. I thank you for sitting with this complexity instead of looking away or running away from it. I thank you for helping me build spaces where Black women can think deeply, feel honestly, and remember fully. If this found you at the right time, share it with someone else who might need it. Not just another Black woman, but a Black man who may need to feel a little remembrance as well. And if you're willing, tell me in the comments, what wisdom do you think came through your father's line, your paternal line? Or rather, what wisdom do you feel coming through your father's line? Because it's not always what we think. See how you feel into it. And if it applies, happy Father's Day to you. Until next time, y'all already know, take good care of you. I'll see you in the next video.